Today, I'm going to be showing off the IBM PC Music Feature Card and another sound-related card from IBM, the Personal System 2 Speech Adapter. We'll start with the Music Feature Card, and the first thing we'll need to do is unbox it. There are two main sections to the package, and the foam part contains some floppy disks, which are just diagnostic disks and don't really have much relevance to the music card. And here we have a MIDI breakout box for connecting your external MIDI devices. And then in this box, we have the actual expansion card. And here it is. You can see it's quite complex for a sound card, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get to shortly. But first, let's take a look at the heart of the sound generation, the Yamaha YM2164. Now, this chip was primarily used in a number of Yamaha and Korg synthesizers. These are not toys, these are professional devices, so it's safe to say the chip was a fairly capable synthesizer. In fact, the 2164 is almost identical in nearly every way to the 2151. And if you start looking at everything the 2151 was used in, the list gets quite long indeed. In fact, the Commander X16 uses either chip, as we have a supply of both and they are pin compatible, so some systems ship with the 2164 and others with the 2151. And I have raved in the past about how capable of a sound chip it is for our system. The chip is a 4-operator FM synthesizer with 8 independent voices. That being said, we aren't talking about a sound card with a YM2151 just connected to the system bus like Texelec's SAM card. In this configuration, the Yamaha chip is connected straight to the system bus so the CPU can control it, much like an AdLib card, which used a slightly inferior 2-operator FM chip, but again, directly on the system bus so that software could access it directly. In fact, the IBM Music Feature Card works in an entirely different way. Let's look at some of the chips on the card, and one thing that's immediately noticeable is the presence of its own Z80 processor, ROM, and 16K of static RAM. It's like its own little computer. Why would you need things like this just to make a sound card for a PC? Several PC sound devices came to market the same year in 1987, including the well-known AdLib, Kovac SpeechThing, and the Roland MT32. And taking a look at their launch prices, it's also quite interesting. It was priced more closely to the Roland MT32, and that makes sense because it actually has more in common with the MT32 than the other two devices. So it turns out the Music Feature Card was basically a MIDI controller card combined with a Yamaha FB01 synthesizer and placed together on one card. The FB01 was a competing product to the MT32, which had come out the year before in 1986. As you can see, I happen to have one here, and I'm going to open it up for you so you can see the insides. And what do we see? All of the same chips present on the IBM Music Feature Card. Well, first I'd like to tackle some misconceptions. For example, the very purpose behind this card. So it was not intended as a sound card for adding music to video games. It was intended to be a musical composition tool for professionals. Now, unfortunately, it didn't support the MPU 401 MIDI standard, so it wasn't compatible with any software that supported MIDI. Nevertheless, it had a decent support from the big players such as Yamaha's Playrec, Electronic Arts Music Construction Set, and of course, Cakewalk Pro. So it worked decently well for its intended purpose. However, since we're basically dealing with a MIDI device at this point, rather than directly controlling the sound chip, it does mean the sound chip can't really be used to its full potential, and here's an interesting analogy to why that is. What if we compared it with a piece of visual artwork instead of sound? Imagine as an artist, instead of being given a brush to work with, you're given a variety of clip art like this, and these would be analogous to patches on a MIDI device. And so as an artist, you can put these pieces of clip art together and even come up with something that looks pretty nice. And obviously, the more types of clip art you have, the more sophisticated of a painting you could make, but it will never be quite as flexible as giving the artist a brush so they can draw it however they want. Nevertheless, I wanted to try to give you some idea as to what it is capable of, and one easy way to do that would simply be to show you what the FB01 is capable of, since it's basically the same thing. So I'm going to connect it to the MIDI card on my Commander X16, since that's probably the easiest method I have to currently send MIDI to another device. Now, to power up the FB01, and I should set it to mode 18, which lets you have 8 different monophonic instruments. The irony here is that the X16 has the exact same sound chip on its motherboard, but we won't be using that. So I'll set it to use the external MIDI port. Now, unfortunately, playing any old MIDI file sounds terrible. this is supposed to be Mission Impossible, for example. And that's because the FB01 predates the general MIDI standard, therefore all of the instruments are set to the wrong thing. And finding any MIDI files designed just for the FB01 has been futile. So I asked Anders Jensen if he'd compose something on the FB01 since I knew he had one. And well, here it is. And another interesting example would be Espen Kraft's video where he composed an entire song on the FB01. Okay, well, what about playing something on the music feature card itself? Well, for that, I'll need a computer, and I don't have an authentic IBM that works at the moment, so I'll just use this AST-386. Interestingly enough, there's a note posted to the inside from Josh Kemp, who donated it to me, but also a note showing it used to belong to the Folsom State Prison in California. Once installed, I thought I could at least use a real IBM monitor, which I happen to have handy. Unfortunately, one problem is I simply couldn't find a setting on my camera that would match the frequency of this monitor. So to avoid having to deal with the flickering, I figured I'd just give in and use an LCD monitor. Now, I got these two floppies with the card, but they don't really have any music software on them, and the diagnostic program won't even run on this AST, so I'll need something else to show off. If you look at Moby Games, it shows there are 17 games which support the card. However, it isn't even really that many because at least 2 of these are just compilations of the other games. So if you take those out, it's really just 15 games that supported the card. Also, every one of these games, except for one, was made by Sierra, probably all using the same sound system. As you can see, such as with Space Quest 3 here, Sierra games supported a wide variety of sound devices. In fact, it's no coincidence that it also supports the Yamaha FB01. The downside is Sierra tended to have a single musical score and then tried to convert that music to whatever sound card you select using a driver. And thus their music was never highly optimized for any particular sound card. Since they already supported MIDI devices in their sound driver, it was probably just low-hanging fruit to be able to support the music feature card as well. Nevertheless, let's see how it sounds. Okay, the intro music doesn't sound that great. I feel like the volumes of some of the channels are too high, while others are too low. That being said, the in-game music doesn't sound too bad. The quality here sounds somewhere in between the ad-lib and the MT32. I tried using PlayRec, which is one of the recommended composition tools for the card, but on my 386 it just crashes immediately and says that the IRQ was not found. After troubleshooting this for a while, including trying some different jumper settings, I just wasn't able to get it to work. And then I talked to Jim Leonard, and he told me that this card notoriously only works with XT class systems. So I borrowed this Packard Bell XT system from Texelec and installed the card in that. The question is, will it work now? And it appears the answer is yes. Okay, so this is PlayRec. This software was used to allow people to compose their own multi-track musical scores. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing that, but I will pick one of the example songs that comes with the program so we can have a listen. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad, especially for 1987. Okay, let's try another song. So this is kind of interesting. Most FM-based chips are good at making certain sounds, but not so good at others. And the piano has always been a weak spot for FM synthesizers. However, the piano here doesn't sound half bad. It's not perfect, of course, but better than most I've heard. So, in summary, this card was pretty rare, pretty expensive, and it was designed with composers in mind and not video games. And while it did have support from some video games, notably the Sierra games, that was probably more of an afterthought on Sierra's part. Now, time to move along and take a look at this other thing from IBM, the personal speech adapter. Okay, time to unbox this speech adapter. This device also came out in 1987, the same year as the music feature card. On top, we get a shrink-wrapped manual of sorts, and next we get this cute little box, and it doesn't come out the way I thought it would. There we go. And the last thing we get here is the card. As you can see, this is boxed similarly to the music feature card. And another similarity I see is that it doesn't really come with any software that makes use of it. It's kind of a weird IBM philosophy, I guess. Okay, let's take a look at what's on the card. It has this large chip here that's just a general purpose I/O chip, a programmable timer, 32K of ROM, which holds various speech patterns, and of course the most important chip, a Texas Instruments TMS 5220C. As you probably know, Texas Instruments chips were the king of speech synthesis in the 1980s, going all the way back to 1978 with the 5100 that was used in the Speak and Spell. And all the chips that came after were based on that same design and technology. Now, these chips are used in all sorts of things, way too many to cover here. But let's quickly look at the 5220C, which is the chip used in this card. It was also used in a ton of arcade machines, as you can see, but it's almost identical and even pin compatible with its predecessor, the 5220, which was used in all sorts of things. Some of these I'm sure you'll recognize. And then I should mention the 5200, which isn't pin compatible, but is otherwise almost identical and used in a whole bunch of other things. So as you can see, the chip used in this card was used in quite a few other products from the 1980s. Now, looking at this little speaker box that comes with it, it also has not one but two headphone jacks, which are designed for the larger quarter-inch style. Interestingly enough, by 1987, most consumer devices were using the 1/8 inch style jack, but the larger style here was still common for professional and educational use. Next to that, there is a microphone jack where presumably you could record your own voice. The ROM chip in this thing holds 196 pre-recorded words. They're recorded by Mitch Carr, the same Dallas radio personality that was used in the Speak and Spell. However, the chip could also play samples from RAM as well, so software could use their own custom words. However, the real trouble for demonstrating this card has simply been finding any compatible software. After chatting with Jim Leonard, who has a PC Junior sidecar speech adapter, which is also really rare, we had a hypothesis. The PC Junior device came out in 1985, 2 years before this card. As you can see by looking at the PCB, it has more or less all the same chips that's on the ISA card, although the speech chip itself is the 5220 model. However, remember I said these two chips were basically the same and even pin compatible, right? And there are a few archived software applications that supported the PC Junior speech adapter. So what if this card was just an ISA version of the same device? Well, one way to find out would be to install the card and try some of that software. The first thing I tried was Bouncy Bees Letters, and so does it work? Unfortunately, no. I also had this other program that was some sort of speech player, and it didn't work either. It would pause as if it was playing, but I'd never hear anything out of the speaker. However, I noticed something odd. If the card was not installed in the computer, this program would behave somewhat differently. It wouldn't display an error or anything, but it would immediately return to the command prompt rather than pausing like it was playing. I was a bit confused over this for a while, and I played with the volume control in the little box to no avail. I even opened it up and confirmed there is a speaker inside of it. However, then I got the idea to connect an amplifier to one of the headphone jacks, and what do you know? It works.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
There are a dozen or so little recordings of the disc image I found. Most seem to be from a young girl saying random things.
How do you do? Entirely new. Yes, it's endurable.
So, I'm not sure why the speaker isn't working, but it does appear the card itself works, and it is compatible with the PC Junior software. So, I guess that means I should try Bouncy Bees Letters again and see what we get.
Hello, I'm Bouncy Bee.
And it indeed works.
Let's learn our letters.
And here's some interesting trivia for you. So this software is using a lot of the built-in vocabulary, and it sounds just like a speak and spell.
Fantastic flying letters.
But it's also using some of its own vocabulary as well, which sounds indistinguishable. And I'm told that IBM hired the same voice actor, so the samples would all match. So I suspect this product probably didn't see a whole lot of usage, especially in the years following, because software companies had already figured out how to do digitized speech on the internal PC speaker, plus a whole plethora of sound cards were coming onto the market that also offered DACs for really high quality digital speech. The only real advantage the TI chips had was the fact that they had a built-in audio compression system that would make the file sizes very small and also remove any load from the CPU. But again, in the coming years, storage systems got greatly expanded as well as CPU power, so there probably just wasn't a whole lot of advantage to it anymore. That being said, that's all for this episode. As always, thanks for watching.